2020. New epoch. TMT. The Incorrigible MrZeppo, coming at you kind of live from sunny Southern California. Hello and namaste, my friends. Greetings and salutations, one and all. Thank you for tuning in. If you are new to the show, hello. I am less than average. Wait, that's a horrible kickoff. Hello and welcome to everybody new. Note to self, edit that flub out when we updraft this episode. Welcome to my humble podcast, live audio blog, news, critique, talk show styled, electronic media communication program. I am your ever eccentric host, the Incorrigible MrZeppo. For those wondering, I'm a real person here in this place y'all call reality. I am portraying a fictionalized version of an archetype I created that's part of a literary project I'm slowly working on. If you'd like to get a taste of what that is, head on over to wattpad.com on the interwebs. There is both a website and an app. That content is all literary fiction. Sci-fi, adventures, espionage, intrigue, political debate, socio-political commentary. I aspire, I suppose, if I were to humbly explain myself for reals to anybody going, what the fuck is this thing on Wattpad? I aspire to create a series of books that defines a world that is our generation's reinterpreting the nightmare of George Orwell's Orwellian, quote, 1984. I don't want to be accused of just, trying to rip that off, but it is, of course, a seminal, influential work for myself and, of course, I'm sure many other creators out there. I digress. This podcast is just a wee tiny nugget of ingredient in that particular set of projects. But it is also, my friends, for anybody who may be confused or so new that they're not, up to speed on all the layers of silliness going on the show. It is a genuine and authentic talk show set here and now in our present day of preeminent Trump-topianism. And it is then referenced in a near futuristic post-dystopian novel as sort of like either the father or grandfather, I don't remember off the top of my head right now, of the primary character in that book series that goes by the name of The Incorrigible MrZeppo. If that makes sense, cool. If you're lost, I apologize. But hopefully, it will all make sense soon. Either way, if you have not taken the opportunity, dear friends, to follow me on Instagram at MrZeppo, that's M-R, no period, Z-E-P-P-O. I capitalize the M and the Z, not the R, right? visually whenever I present it, but I don't think that Instagram gives a shit, and it's probably easier if you don't capitalize it in terms of finding me. I digress. I'm also on Twitter, Facebook, and of course, right here, and my pirate radio platform central headquarters, Sprecher.com. This podcast is also available on iTunes, Google Play, although I think currently, asterisk, note to self, I think the YouTube link is fucked, and I messed it up. So I'm not sure if I think the iTunes RSS feed is jacked. So if you're not getting updates on iTunes, you can't hear this right now, but I'm apologizing to you. And when you catch up, because all this will like flood into your thing later when I fix that link, I apologize for the mild inconvenience. It's also available on a long list of other podcasty thingamahoodles, which if you really, really need to know, because you only want to use the one that you're using, the list is available on my Sprecher.com page. But if you're on Sprecher.com anyways, vis-a-vis the website, take a test drive. Listen to a few of these episodes. Some of them are crazy, stupid long because I lose track of time, and either talk myself into several rabbit holes or go a little spacey and lose track of what's even coming out of my mouth. And I apologize for those episodes. Some of them are really out there, and don't make sense because they're technically sort of rough drafts for other projects. For example, inside the Zeppo's studio for actors actoring is a totally different, prehistory sidebar fictional radio drama piece about actors in a studio trying to make a show that's going to save the world from its self-destruction. I haven't decided what era to set it in, and I haven't really gotten anywhere with the actual script development, but I recorded a sample set of episodes just to sort of go and define the space, right? That's pure fiction. But it's all interwoven and interconnected, just like in reality. Everything, art is replicating and mirroring and referencing life, and life constantly reinvents and re-expresses art in ways that blow the mind. Because, if I may drop a bomb on you friends right now, especially if you're really new and you have no idea what the fuck my show's all about, at the core of it is this simple assertion, which I present to you as a theory of don't believe me, don't just take it for granted, and please, please, please don't just dismiss me as a crazy new age woohoo nut job. Check it out. Here's the theory. And it's based on several other theories, right? And if you've already heard this, I apologize for the tedium. We'll move on in just a second. But the theory goes, everything is consciousness. You, me, we all have consciousness. It's not a product of our spongy tissue we call the brain, but rather something that the brain and other levels of our being that we are usually kept in ignorance of co-create in a convergent, co-emergent fashion. And that our experience here is all interconnected and interwoven, and that it is indeed a sort of simulation. It is indeed a dream within dreams within dreams within dreams. And it is indeed a Schrodinger's cat paradox of infinite probable outcomes being explored and perceived. But not just by you and me, dear listener, dear friend, dear collaborator, dear co-creator of the universe, but by everyone in relationship to that which we quite foolishly minimize to the term God. And now, I don't mean that with any disrespect to anybody's ideas and anybody's interpretive, conceptual model of God, nor do I mean to disrespect the actual thing that we indicate with those ideas and words and symbols. I'm just trying to clarify from which perspective in the multitude of possible arrangements of opinion here, this opinion talk show is anchored in. And that's that you're God, I am God. Rather, more accurately, dear friends, God is you. And that thing you call you, the thing you call me, is just sort of like content. Content that's being simultaneously co-created every heartbeat, every moment of your life between you and the rest of reality. And that includes you and the multitude of sub-entities you call your body, the cells, all of that. It's all consciousness. The coffee cup that you're holding while you drink your coffee is consciousness being a coffee cup, right? So I digress. From that perspective, I invite you to join me, or I join with you, in the exploration of the world as we see it, as it is available for us to perceive now, and what about that, the way it actually is now, is redonkadonk, and maybe should just be set aside, right? Like, I don't know, the entirety of politics as a game / confluence of events we participate in / mega business. Because if I may, today, on the eve of, I think, the preeminent or pentultimate Democratic debate, it may very well be the very last one. I know that Iowa is next, right? Like all the Iowa stuff. And I think there's more debates then, so I can't really, I don't want to mislabel this, because then I'll be labeled a rube who doesn't know what's going on. I know what's going on. We're on the eve of a very seminal, important, maybe career-ending debate. Cory Booker's left the race already, right? Unless that was fake news. I don't know. I didn't double-check it because I just sort of saw it during my hiatus. And I'm neat. I don't care. I'm at Disneyland right now. I digress. That's technically a fib. For the fiction of the show, I didn't actually go to Disneyland, but I did go to several other touristy, theme parky, and related type things because I had actual real-life family whose identity you don't need to give a shit about right now, all in for the holidays, which is a large part why I was on hiatus. So, right, the theory and how it applies to this talk show, etc. Each segment is an exploration of a web of ideas from a different angle, I might propose to you. And some of them include little mini projects that are just whimsical whims of fancy and creative outbursts. And it's also, just a general radio theater of the mind, in which I will hopefully, in the not-too-distant future, present to you even more well-crafted, sophisticated, less half-assedly sort of improvised. I don't improv. I just sort of don't script things, right? But I do have, as a matter of fact, several things on the back burners from inception, from the moment of conceiving of this podcast as an idea, that I want to feature and highlight little mini series of fictional pieces and present them in the style of, in a postmodern reinterpreting of the ye old ancient radio days of analog audio only radio theater, right? Radio melodrama. At any rate, this episode's not that. This episode is just me saying hello to you, dear listener, and welcome to the future. That's really what I want to talk about today, friends. But in order to transition, I'm going to go ahead and play one of the many themes I've created over the last several period of time that I've been doing this crazy project. As soon as I find it. There it is, right there, my friends, because I'm going to kick off 2020 with a little compilation of all the mini segments in one big mashup that hopefully won't last for way too long. Here comes the theme song to Cannabis Talk, because I'm going to hit this pipe, and then we're going to talk about cannabis and stuff. Hey. You. Hi there. It's 4:19. Do you have a minute? Good. Then let's pack a bowl. 'Cause it's time for Cannabis Talk, a special 420 themed segment of the almost daily ZenCast. Hosted by spiritual cannabis mystic, the Incorrigible MrZeppo. Let's get lit, folks. Yeah. What's up, man? Do you mind if I actually smoke a bowl now? I cleared out the last bowl that I had lingering from before starting the show while I was doing the graphics for the cover. Yeah, packed myself a new one during the theme song. And now, I wanted to share with you my thoughts about why I am a fan of cannabis. And I misspelled it just now, but entheogen, or entheogenics, or entheogenesis. I sometimes, quite seriously but very casually, inform people during conversations online or otherwise that I am indeed an entheogenic cannabis mystic, or an entheogenic mystic, or just an entheogenicist. Although I'm trying to figure out a cool way to conjugate / converge mysticism, or some sort of reference to shaman type language with the word entheogenic or entheogenistic. And I'm an entheogenicism. Mysticism. My mouth is just stumbling through some, possible mispronunciations. But an entheogen, if I may read to you, my dear friends, from Wikipedia, and don't just blindly believe me, actually go to Wikipedia and or a real life library and get a real life book from, something that predates the internet, just so that you can confirm, right, that it's not just some internet bullshit. An entheogen is a class of psychoactive substances that induce any type of, quote, spiritual experience. I'm adding the quotes, end quote. And I wanted to quote that word not dismissively, but rather as a sort of the term is a term of art, right? And so it's, the other way I express that is I capitalize things. If you ever see weird phrasings where I capitalize words, I'm not just being weird or trendy with online half jargonized, chat motif or what's the word? Trends or, archetypes. I believe that sometimes phrases should be honored and respected visually because they're not just common words anymore. They represent a term of art, a technical term, as we say in theater sometimes, that's actually the technical term when we say widgety widge, or something like that. But in real terms, spiritual experience isn't just a word like, rain barrel with water in it. But then again, if everything is consciousness, and consciousness is that which we call God, we can get really nerdy and call everything a spiritual experience. I return to the definition of entheogen. An entheogen is a class of psychoactive substances that induce any type of spiritual experience aimed at development or sacred use. the term entheogen is often chosen to contrast recreational use of the same drugs. Or I would add, similar, right? But yeah, I am an entheogenic cannabis mystic. And I mean that quite sincerely and quite meaningfully. I have in the past not been that while still having a consumer relationship with the product we call cannabis. But that's to be explored perhaps in another episode around different subject matter or different themes. What I posit to you, dear friends, dear listeners, is that you, and this may be something you already understand and know and appreciate, but it may be something that's radical to you. It might be something that makes no sense to you. It may even be an intimidating statement. But there are natural, organic things in the world, entities, beings, living beings in the world, such as cannabis and other plants, and even other creatures, living creatures that are not plants, that provide, through some of their naturally occurring body chemistry, experiences that for centuries, if not millennia, our species has revered for specific reasons. And that in our postmodern context, it can be justly argued, correctly argued, that those substances have either been vilified, attacked, made illegal, marginalized, or made, converted into an abusive, toxic, addictive version of itself with no honoring of, and those examples are tobacco and alcohol, right? They're not as let us say, powerful, tobacco and alcohol, as some of the more obvious ones like cannabis or ayahuasca, right? But alcohol has a long history of sacred, reverent, ritualistic use. And then there's the way that alcohol is marketed to us day in, day out in our society, the way it's available to us in most grocery stores, in most communities. And mind you, I'm someone who is not speaking from a place of pretense in self-righteousness, right? I am a victim of the abuse of our society. I am not some virtuous saint claiming to have magically avoided all the traps. Therefore, dear friends, I propose to you that one of the significant ways to discern, besides the conscious use of, let's say, the term entheogenic approach, I'm going to take an entheogenic approach to consuming cannabis. But what does that mean in practical terms? Join me for a moment in a really simple and arguably, from my humble perspective, quite beautiful little mini ritual that's I've collaboratively invented with the various people involved in all of the things that I'm doing. In other words, I'm collaborating with the people who grew this herb, right, that I've packed this bowl with, which, by the way, is the last little smudgeon, which I magically happen to have left of this round of engaging in ritual use of cannabis. And one of the things that I do, for those of you who've been following along, you're familiar at least with the term because I've talked about it. And sidebar, I have a whole, I owe the audience an apology and need to explain about a previous attempt to do with this particular thing I'm about to do. Because I totally set this up in an old episode, 9 months ago, and then never followed through on doing any episodes about it. But I digress. One of the things that I do as a entheogenic cannabinoid mystic, or a mystic of cannabinoid entheogenic mysticism. That's not really one word, but they flow together as two words and a term of art. Cannabinoidal entheogenic mysticism. One of my practices is to purge, right? To clear the palate, to take a break, to take a vacation. As you may or may not know, the origin of the word breakfast is literally the two words that are the term of art, breaking fast. And I say the term of art because it's a spiritual practice that has depth and meaning across multiple traditions, and that has indeed its own craft or artistry to it as a health practice. Warning, don't go running off. Never go running off and doing crazy things like trying to do a day or three of fasting or a pretty intense dietary food purge cleanse thing without really doing your due diligent research and really, really, really talking to people who have experience. Because your body, our bodies, are living collectives, right? We are made up of little tiny beings that are alive that we dismissively call our cells, and each of them aggregate in communities, which we sort of dismissively call our organic anatomy, our organs, the bones, the tissue, and the lungs and heart and da-da-da. Those are communities of living beings, and they have needs and requirements, and they have inputs, and they have outputs. Does that language make sense to you, friends? Garbage in, garbage out. That's from computer science. But if you know your body to be a living collective, hive-minded being, like you are, not one thing, but a bazillion things, busy doing many different things, all in harmony and congruence together. Understanding that they have inputs and outputs, rather that if you give the body X, Y, and Z, it will do something other than what it does when you only give it A, B, and C. Does that make sense? In other words, when you only eat the food that society provides for us as food in the supermarkets, your body will only react to that food in the normal standard ways that we all kind of know, which is if it's junky or kind of bordering on junk food, if it's not really healthy food, in other words, it will respond, our bodies and the communities of our cells will respond with bad health. And that the only way we can really fix that, well, there's two ways, arguably, according to the things I've looked into. And one is to adhere to the dynamic living rules of reality and eat as healthy as possible. Now, lots of people have lots of different opinions about what that may or may not look like. And I have yet found someone holistically humble enough to not get sort of militant about it yet in terms of leading voices out there or leading movements. But I could be wrong. I'm not really busy with that track. I'm not really investigating that path of intellectual investigation at the moment. It's one of those projects on the back burner. Conversely, in terms of entheogenic mysticism, we can look at substances like alcohol, caffeine, tobacco, some of the herbal supplement teas, or just herbal supplements in general, whatever format they take. And of course, tried and true friends of all of us hippies, cannabis, and other increasingly more controversial plants. And attribute to them rationally, without wild, absurd leaps of faith that are dangerous and contravailing to the facts, assert that, like, with investigation and with personal investigation and personal verification, you can determine that there is a entheogenic way to engage with alcohol, tobacco, and cannabis, et cetera, either individually or, in some sort of combination of different organizations of them, or in different ways. approaches to utilizing them, or you can approach them as party drugs, right? Like you can smoke cigarettes for the quote unquote relaxing effects, which is a party drug effect. It's like I just want to get the quick, immediate, instant gratification of sucking on this and experiencing some immediate body change, some body phenomena alteration. I can drink this booze and get drunk. Cigarettes, we don't really think about it in as obvious terms. It's always been a little bit more sublimated. And it's also a little bit more immediately dangerous, right? Like alcohol will kill you. Even if you're just a polite, you don't think you have a problem user. But obviously, yes, if you're like a heavy abuser of alcohol, it's clear. It will slowly destroy you, and that ends in death. But cigarettes get you even faster, right? Those substances are in our marketplaces by no accident whatsoever. They were hijacked by profiteers who encountered them in totally different cultural contexts way back in the day, right? Our predecessors who lived free of these self-oppressive tendencies for marketplaces and profit motives and the corruption that follow, they had completely different relationships with all of these substances. And my proposition to you, dear friends, especially in this particular segment or subseries of my show, is that with cannabis, as it is already becoming normalized, because the obviousness of its health benefits have come to light, finally, at the level of social awareness, sufficiently powerful enough to make those changes happen in our societal structures and norms, then we should take a pause, dear friends, and possibly contemplate the spiritual applications. And thus, I invite you to join me, taking a tiny moment, whether you have already been smoking as a listener previously or in enjoying this podcast's unraveling out of control. It's already way too long. Or you've, whatever, you just know that you've been packing a bowl since I started talking about cannabis. Or you're not smoking at all. I invite you to join me in sharing with me my real life moment of consuming cannabis with an entheogenic, mystical, spiritual approach. And here's what makes it different, right? For me, I'm sharing it with you, and I'm honoring it by calling it that instead of anything else. And I'm not judging or dismissing none of the popular jargon or language. I'm just calling to your attention that language matters. Asterisks in that. I think I've already done a whole episode, but put a big fat red pin on the corkboard of things we need to return to and discuss again. Language matters. Words have power. To the point that one might even argue that power is effectively, by all intents and definitions, magical. But I digress. They most certainly have implications in how our mind actually works. So I call this a spiritual moment. I finished packing the bowl. While the other music was playing, I was also playing a little bit of meditation music that's really sort of subtle and about, binaural sound wave things. And now I'm going to play, as an internet influencer, a really beautiful, simple track that is, of course, it's just music, right? It's just people singing. It's my favorite kind of music, when you can make beautiful music with just the human voice. So this is a beautiful chorus, as you can find them on Insight Timer, which I do believe is available both on the Google App Store and the Apple devices App Store. It's a beautiful piece, and just please take a moment to listen to it. I'm going to play it through my Harman Kardon speaker, which was given to me as a gift. But hey, if you really want to get into personal at home sound meditation, but don't have the money for a bazillion singing bowls, and you want to work with sound waves as other people have recorded them, with sincere spiritual, even tantric or Reiki intent of like communicating to you with the sound waves, and you know that you want to get a good speaker, and you can afford one of these because these are kind of pricey, I gotta admit, but they're so worth it. Or if you can get one used, it's in good condition in whatever used online marketplace you might find them, snag it, like get it. But I digress. A beautiful chorus, as it would be heard by you if you were here in my contemplative studies office / recording studio with me on my Harman Kardon, as played by my LG G7 through Insight Timer. Just to get all the marketing jargon out there as an influencer, right? Like, no one, by the way, honest, nobody pays me for jack shit. I just am sort of satirically lampooning the marketplace. But I also am sincerely giving credit to all the things being used because they deserve being credited, right? I don't want to get sued. Nobody sue me. I do this for fun. I'm not making any money on it yet. Although if I could turn this into my job, I pray that every day. And I'm going to include that in my little manifestation prayer now. But let's listen to the beautiful chorus. I'm going to stop rambling. Om Shanti Metta Shanti Om Namaste. Om Shanti Metta Shanti Om Namaste. Thank you for that. Usually, when I do that practice, pardon me. Usually when I do that practice, I'll play that track 3 times. I'm not going to bore you with that because maybe you weren't prepared for a meditation. Maybe that took you by surprise. Maybe you would love to listen to it 3 times with me right now. I'll do that. I may have already done that in a previous episode, so surprise. But I'll certainly come back and do that again in a segment of the Almost Daily ZenCast. I've rambled at you enough. Thank you for joining me for a little mini taste of cannabis talk. I'm going to go ahead and play now the cannabis talk outro and then transition to a little bit more because this is actually going to be a super long episode where I'm going to do all the segments. That's not true. I may not be able to do that. My voice is already starting to want to give out because, as I may or may not have shared with you, instead of going on deep, hibernating, personal hiatus, and mind you, I'm not complaining. I'm just stating facts here. My voice is kind of trashed, so it's in the low and smoky range, and I might sound aggressive right now because I need to speak up, and it's feeling kind of draggy and like I should shut the hell up. But instead of hibernating, as I typically do, between Christmas and my birthday, which is early in January. And, of course, January is the entire of my birthday month, and I kind of sometimes take leave of absence through that as much as possible, on as many fronts as I can. Although some years, obviously, I've worked straight through. But when I can, I try to take as much time off to hibernate, to really recuperate, to focus on me and being alone and being in silence and being in like deep restorative sleep, if possible, and in not having to go places and not having to be in crowds, right? And I'll be quite frank with you, smoking a lot of weed, more than I would recommend anyone should smoke, and try to live a normal, working life. Like, that's not, I go on a deep exclusionary journey, right? And I use cannabis not as a party drug to delude me from the pains of my reality in this free-range, open-air, distract and divide, comfort-driven, profit motive, debt slavery prison that we all live in, that we call the free world. And I'm not just criticizing America, folks. The whole of the international system is caught up and inculcated in that corruption. But we'll talk about that in depth, both in past episodes and in future episodes. So enjoy that, friends, if that's a new concept to you. I literally came across someone the other day on the internet in a private, like, anonymous chat platform. Not a private chat platform. Well, what's a private chat? But they just they'd posted something publicly in a forum, and then I had a private chat with them, and it's like they had no idea, right? They'd never even heard of conspiracy theory as a community of people discussing what may or may not be going on behind the obvious power and manipulation structures that we call postmodern society. But I digress. I was going to play the outro. Here's the outro to, make sure I click on the right one, Cannabis Talk. And then we're going to see if my voice will hold up and jump into another episode. If not, I might cut it here. I'm going to figure it out in just a second. As always, thanks for joining me. Well, folks, that bowl is cashed and dusted. Thank you for joining me for yet another most excellent session of Cannabis Talk. Stay lit, pay it forward, and remember, the world needs healing, and cannabis heals. Until next time, I have been your spiritual cannabis mystic talk show host, the Incorrigible MrZeppo. For coughing. As my old and very dear friend of mine used to say, I guess he still says it, I don't know. He would say, after a good, solid coughing fit, he would, kudos himself. He'd pat himself on the back and say something like, yeah, way to get it in there. And I would ask him I asked him once, after a while of watching him do that, but what is that about, man? And he responded, when you're coughing, it's like the opposite of when you're coughing because of cigarettes. When you have a smoker's cough, you're hacking out your lung because it's all gross and nasty and dying from the tar. When you've got the cannabis cough, you're getting the healing
nutrients, CBDs and THCs from the cannabis smoke deeper in your lungs, which is helping to push out and clean all the gross, nasty shit. So that cough is like healing. It's the healing cough. Of course, I am severely paraphrasing him, and he was, at the time of that conversation, we were both extremely high. But I digress. A little bonus material for the next Cannabis Talk episode. Okay. And now for the outro.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, reprising their opening bit of music, which I talked all through, DJ Zed and the Purple Mush Political Outrage with West Coast Trap 222. That was DJ Zed featuring Purple Mush and the Political Outrage. Their fresh new album titled The Early Years is dropping soon on Bandcamp.